Alright, so I just swapped out the bases from the other alternator, and now I'm going to put things back together. So, put that back in. You didn't modify that at all. Got the brush holder with the drill bit in it. Drill bit goes in the little slot that's in the back of the alternator, right yonder. It's a good idea to start the screws by hand. Make sure they're not cross-threaded so they don't snap when you throw the machine. That one's in. Okay, so that's what the inside should look like when you're done. While you're in there, put a little dab of grease in there to lubricate that bearing in the back there. Make sure you get all the bolts in there. There's 2 bolts that hold the bridge rectifier. There we go. We do it right the 4th time here at Casa de Meyer. You don't need to go hog wild on these nuts. That's what she said. Just snug them up. I don't want to break another one. All right. Let's get your windings back in. Put your armature. The armature didn't come out of the case, so just leave it put. Try to take it apart. You can index this any way you want. You got 4 different index points. You don't need to be, you don't have to put the 2 halves together the same way they came apart. I want mine set up so that I can. Mine's going to be set up kind of like, kind of like this. This is going to be mounted against the engine. I want to have access to the plug to plug this thing in, so I'm going to index it there. And it might vary in your application. Every application is going to be differently. It's going to be differently. It's going to be different in every application. So. Whatever works for you. That's what I'm trying to say. 4 bolts that hold the back on. Test it, make sure it spins without grinding. Bearings are good. Go ahead and pull the drill bit out the back. Yay. So make sure that when you take your pulley off, that you don't lose these. There's usually one on the front side, and there's one on the back side. This one is, I didn't take it. It was stuck onto the bearing in the front, and I could have taken it off, but I just left it. It wasn't making any noise, so I just left it be. But make sure that spacer goes back on there, otherwise it's going to lock your alternator up tighter than a drum. It won't turn. That's what I'm talking about. Put your thing on there, and it'll make contact with the case. So this spacer actually holds your cooling fan up off the case far enough to clear the case. So make sure that goes back on there. Basically, you're just going to put together the same way you take it apart, just in reverse. So this has a spacer that's integral to it. And in some cases, like this pulley can't go on here. I need a 6-groove pulley. This is a 1, 2, 3. This is a 5-groove pulley, so I'm not going to use this one. I'll take the pulley that I have on this one off. Swap the pulleys out. Where'd my impact go? Watch your ears. Oh, by the way, if you don't have an impact, you ain't getting this nut off. See what I'm talking about? This pulley has a spacer that's part of the pulley. It's cast right into the pulley itself. This one doesn't. The spacer's on the alternator, so you know, if you gotta swap pulleys out, make sure that you understand that, you know, these spacers are gonna vary. And I think it's a different size than the one before. It's a different size than the one that's underneath it. Save that. So that's it. Now, to complete the welder setup, let me change that camera angle. Well, you're gonna get some welding leads. I've heard of guys using jumper cables. I don't recommend that. Jumper cables just aren't capable. Look, I've melted jumper cables jump starting cars before. Do you really want to try to hook a welding rod into a jumper cable and weld with it? Electrocution sucks. So, you know, get some welding leads. If you can get them used, great. If not, go to Welding Supply and go buy some. You don't need that much. 20 feet of positive, 20 feet of negative. 40 feet's all you need. You're really not going to be any further than 20 feet from your car, hopefully. And you really don't want to carry that much around. I got some welding leads, so that's, and I got a welding rod holder, a stinger, and a ground clamp. This is the control panel off my own. I had a voltmeter here and hand throttle. What did I do with that? Made a hand throttle. That's just a friction fit deal. There we go. Shut her down, rev her up. Had a low car stainless steel sheathed throttle cable that was hooked up through the stock bracketry and hooked up to the TVI, and this allowed me to control the engine speed from the engine compartment. So I didn't have to have somebody sitting in the driver's seat mashing the gas. And then I got these push type Miller welding leads, and you would hook the positive, use like battery cable or some number 2 battery cable. You know, hook the positive up to your bridge rectifier output, and the negative up to here, and that's your connection. Alright, this is just chucked up in my vise. This is the bracket that I modified. If you saw in yesterday's video on the 85, this is the upper alternator bracket that I built off of for the bracketry for the welder. This would be the welder here. This is actually the welder that I had before. This would be in place of the regular alternator, and they're in the same plane. And by doing this, it allowed me to drive this welder off the same plane as the alternator. I just had to get a longer belt. So on the 85, I was driving the water pump off the crank. The water pump and the alternator driven off a 5-groove serpentine belt. It doesn't actually serpentine, it just does the same thing a V-belt does. It doesn't double back on itself like a traditional serpentine belt does. But I just got one that was a little longer that fit the application. I don't remember how long it was just longer. And what this allowed me to do is, if I didn't want to have to, because as long as this isn't energized, it's just freewheeling. It's not generated. There's no load on it. It's just the parasitic loss from the bearings that you're experiencing. So it's not really costing anything to run a belt on it. and you don't have to swap a belt when you do need it. But if you ever did break a belt and you got the original spare in the car, you can just, you know, eliminate that altogether and not worry about hooking it up and just hook the factory belt up. So that's the example of some bracketry that can be either add a pulley someplace or just put it in line. That's what I'm doing on the Suburban. I'm putting it in line with the existing alternator. In fact, it's mounted right next to the alternator, and I just have to get a belt that's about 6.5 inches longer, and they make one. So that's going to work out just fine. And then I'll show you how to hook this up to start sticking pieces of metal together with electricity. All right, back at it. Got the welder off the mount. There's the back. There's your positive lead. There's your negative lead. Here's your connection for your exciter wires. There's 2 posts here, and it's a lot of times they're either embossed in the casting or they're stamped in the casting, but they're there. Number 1, number 2. You want to hook 12 volts to the number 1 post. Don't do anything with the number 2 post. Just the number 1, 12 volts in. And depending where you're pulling voltage from, you're going to want to. You might want to hook this up to a relay. If you're pulling your voltage off the junction block underneath the hood of the car, or from any kind of distance, then you want to hook up a relay. So that's how you convert an alternator, an AC Delco 12SI, I think is the proper terminology for that particular model. Alternator, converting it into a DC unregulated voltage welder. Now, words of warning: if you're not comfortable doing mechanical things, if you've never opened an alternator before, find somebody who's been in one. Don't try to do this as a virgin project. Just don't do it, because this will kill you if you don't respect it. It'll produce enough voltage and enough amperage to kill you. This isn't a toy, and you should treat it with the respect it deserves. It is capable of taking battery voltage, which is pretty harmless. It might give you a tickle. It's capable of turning battery voltage into an electric chair. So you don't want to mess around with this serious stuff. So if you're not comfortable doing this kind of modification, then don't do it. Just don't do it. I'll post those URLs for the different forums where I got the information so that you can research it yourself. I hope this video helps. If it has, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you don't like this video, comment. I don't care. Be a hater. It is what it is. And if you're not a hater and you like what you see, leave me a thumbs up and comment, man. Be part of the community. What's up? All right? Have a great day. Bye.